This conference will now be recorded.
So guys, please remind me at the start of the class that I need to record.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, usually this is done by the institute, they are not available, so just delegated it to me. Okay, so when I say include parent segments, system automatically populates these two other boxes for me, right? So it basically identifies uh, how many segments are defined, right? So based on the number of segments I select here, right, I'm not going to save it now because it then shows me that grid, and then okay, let me show you. So if I say 4 and I'll also include, so how do I include my rating, performance rating, based on the rating scale, right? Let's see what are the available rating scales. So I've selected this rating scale, right? Let me remove retention ratings. I've selected include pay range segments, right? And then I have selected 4, right? And I'm calling it an amount based in terms of US dollars. Okay, let me do okay. Now if you see, the first one is I selected a 3-point rating scale, right? Now this rating scale or performance rating scale had just 3 ratings, which was underperformed, achieved, and exceeded, right? So this is the first factor based on which I am designing my matrix. My second factor is parent segments, and I defined that the number of parent segments is 4. So for each of those factor combinations, it says if an employee is underperformed and his parent segment is quartile 1, right? So if he is in the quartile 1 segment of his pay range, then what should be the minimum maximum that should be proposed, right? Again, if it's underperformed and he belongs to quartile 2 of his segment, then the minimum and maximum. And again, underperformed quartile 3, underperformed quartile 4, and so on and so forth, achieved, right? So based on the factors I have selected for designing my matrix, system shows me this grid, and I can then propose the minimum and maximum amount, right? So I'm saying if an employee is underperformed and quartile 1, then probably give him minus 500, right? 2 minus 20. If is underperformed and quartile 2, I'm saying, so only in your amount based plans you can specify a negative amount, right? You cannot specify a negative percentage amount, you cannot specify a negative weighted amount, right? So only in those scenarios wherein based on employee performance you actually want to reduce their compensation, and this happens for certain organizations, uh, then you can also define or design your negative matrices, right? And so on and so forth. I'm saying minus 800 maybe, and uh, minus 1000. Now if someone is achieved, I would want to give him from 0 to 1000, uh, and he is already in quartile 4, then I want to give him from 0 to 200 increase. If someone is quartile 3, then 200 to maybe 400 increase, right? Quartile 2, then 400 to 600, right? And if someone is in the minimum quartile, right, and he achieved, then maybe 600 to 800, right? So this is how I design my segments. Let me do okay, right? And everything negative, it is shown in brackets, right? So any employee who's underperformed in quartile 1 gets 500 rupees of decrease, a minimum, and maximum is 0, right? Okay, again, an employee who is already in top quartile but has just achieved would only get 200 to 400 increase, right? Okay, let me delete this. As I mentioned, once you have selected any of these components, then you cannot change the rating scales or segments, right? The only option is to then go ahead and delete it. Let me delete this. We'll just talk about a few again. I'm saying the same thing. 112010 again. So larger the components, if I select a 5-point rating scales, the number of matrix boxes or details that I'll have to fill would be much higher, right? That is why I'm just selecting the minimum rating scale. Okay, now if I select include parent segments, and let's do this, convert this to 3, easier to handle, use below and above segments as well. When I select this, right, and do okay, now the only difference in my first one and this one is that I've selected use below and above segments. Now when I do okay, you'll see that apart from that quartile 1, quartile 2 and quartile 3, because I've only selected 3 quartiles, I'm also getting what happens if the employee is below Q1 and above Q4, right? This is because I've selected that use above and below segments. So if employee is already below quartile 1 and above, this should be actually above quartile 3, right? So a bug with Workday, it is always giving quartile 4. So what happens if an employee is not in any of his quartiles or within that range, but outside this range in terms of being below his range or above his range, right? Okay, so this is use above and below segments. Let me go ahead and delete this once again. Okay, the third one is, again, let me select amount based, US dollars. Again, let me select rating scale. Okay, now when I select, so everything else is pretty straightforward. I can say compa ratio as well. We'll also talk about compa ratio in a bit, or I can say retention ratings, potential ratings, or all of these factors, right? Now this is what I wanted to discuss. The moment I select use multiple targets, my eligibility criteria becomes activated, right? So now what I'm saying is, if an employee gets or meets target or meets his expected rating, then an employee should get compensation increase in the range of 500 to 1000. But if a manager achieves his target, he should be getting in the range of 100 to 200, right? So now I'm, for the same rating or maybe for the same quartile, I'm setting multiple targets, right? Or based on the eligibility criteria, I want to define different ratings, right? That is when I select multiple targets, I would include all my eligibility criteria. So let's see if there is any eligibility criteria available. So managers in GMS India, all regular. Okay, let's select this. uh, is there any non-managers? Okay, non-managers, uh, employees, non-executive salaried. Mm, okay, let's see what is this. uh, Contributor. Okay, this makes sense, right? So now I'm selecting two eligibility criteria. One is for managers, and let's assume the other one is non-managers, right? Okay, and then let me select parent segment as well and select 3, right? So again, I've done basically the same thing. Define the rating scale, included the pay range segments. Then I have also selected use multiple targets, and I'm using two different eligibility criteria, right? And when I do OK, now you see that I have these eligibility criteria populated, right? And I can say, for example, I am saying, let's say my eligibility criteria is employees in India, employees in US, employees in UK. So these are three different eligibility criteria. Now, because this is an amount based plan, I can define for employees in India, the currency is INR. For my employees in US, the currency is US dollars. For my employees in UK, my currency is GBP, right? So based on the eligibility criteria, and the reason this is populated is because I have used multiple targets, right? So based on the eligibility criteria, I can define the currency that would be applicable for them, right? The second thing, when I go to compensation matrix, now you see that I also have that eligibility criteria populated. So if an employee who is underperformed and is Q1 and is a manager, this is the merit increase that should be proposed. However, that same employee or an employee who is underperformed and in parent segment Q1 but is an individual contributor, right? Then what should be the compensation increase that should be proposed, right? Let's look at this in a simpler manner. So I'll select based on country specific maybe. So all of this is pretty straightforward. That is why I'm not creating any one of them. I'm just showing you what are the different combinations that are possible, right? Okay. In fact, when I say different combinations, any one of these combinations is possible, right? So I'm saying I have my employees in India, right? And states and kingdom, right? Let's not select parent segments, else it becomes way too complex, right? So this is what I'm saying. And my default currency is US dollars, right? Because my company is based on US dollars, based in US dollars. When I say you OK, now it shows me for each of these eligibility criterias what should be the currency that is proposed. So this is similar to my allowance plan profiles, right? Or my compensation grade and grade profiles. So on my grade, I'm saying my default currency is US dollars, but within my grade profile, I'm saying for my India employees the currency should be INR, right? So this is similar to my grade and grade profiles. Again, for my UK employees, I'm saying the currency should be GBP, right? And now when I go to compensation matrix, an underperformed employee in India, he should get 0 to 0, UK again 0 to 0, US. But my achieved employee in India, I want to give him 1000 to 2000. In UK, probably I want to give him 50 to 100, right? And my US employee, I want to give him 60 to maybe 150, right? And system does this conversion in terms of US dollars. Okay, so I believe, so now I'm saying an employee in India who has achieved his target gets an compensation increase in terms of these values, right? Okay, as I mentioned, you can define your ratings, your matrix in terms of any or all of these factors. Let me delete this. There's one last thing that I wanted to discuss, which is, sorry guys. Okay, sorry guys. Okay, there's just one last thing that I want to discuss, which was compa ratio. Again, let me select name 1/1/2010, amount based, US dollars. Okay, I would select compa ratio, and then let's select any rating scale, right? So I want to base my compensation matrix based on review ratings, but compa ratio. When I select compa ratio, you see that the options which are highlighted, or the ratio options which are given to me, is 80 and under, 80 to 90, 90 to 100, 100 to 110, right? Okay, now the reason I only get these compa ratio options is because I have configured them in the system, right? Okay, so there's a task which is called maintain compa ratio range. So this is where I have defined that my compa ratio ranges are 80, 90, 100 and 110. So system automatically shows me those segments saying under 80, 80 to 90, 90 to 100, 100 to 110, and above 110, right? 80 and under, 80 to 90, 90 to over 110, right? So based on the ranges that I have defined for my compensation ratio, system automatically shows me the right compa ratio value. Okay, let me also show you a percentage based. So percentage based is pretty, not pretty, it is similar to my amount based plan. The only difference is I don't define any currency, right? Your weighted is, I will talk about your weighted as well probably tomorrow. So when it comes to percentage, because you don't have to define the percentage in terms of currency, whatever is employees base currency or base pay currency, system automatically calculates the percentage value in terms of that currency, right? And that is why I don't have to define the currency value when it comes to percentage, right? Again, apart from that, everything else you see is pretty straightforward. So let me select segments or 3, right? Now instead of, the only difference is for my percentage based compensation matrix and my weightage compensation matrix, I cannot define any negative value, right, or negative percentages, right? This either needs to be 0 or it needs to be positive, right? However, here I'm defining the value in terms of percentage. So when I say 0 to, or let's say 1 to 5 and do OK, right? You see that this is automatically shown in terms of percentage, right? Apart from that, there's absolutely no difference. The only difference is you don't specify any currency value, and this is true even if you use multiple targets. Oh, okay. So even if I use multiple targets the way I had done earlier, right, and let's just select 2 targets, uh, India and UK, and do OK, right? Even over here you see that I don't have an option to define the currency in terms of that eligibility criteria, right? I was getting that when I had selected multiple targets for my amount based matrix, right? So even for your multi targets compensation matrix, you don't have the option to define currency in terms of those different eligibility criteria. Okay, and we have not written any one of this down. I'll do that. We'll also talk about weighted matrices. Okay, guys, any questions on this part? So we'll talk about all these components first. Will eligibility rules, we know already what is an eligibility rules. We'll not talk about eligibility rules. We'll see the other factors are pretty straightforward. So we'll talk about eligibility waiting periods. We'll talk about time proration rules. Your rounding rules are very straightforward, right? So pretty easy. And then we'll see how all of those components come together when you create your merit plans and or your merit plan profiles. Okay, any questions on what we discussed today?
No,
All right.
nothing for me.
All right. Okay, guys, thank you for joining. uh, uh, I think we have
See.
another 6 or 7.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, okay. No, nothing.
All right, guys, thank you. We'll speak again tomorrow. Till then, bye guys.
Yep. Bye.